with me. They're just running around outside right now.
Oh my.
Aw. All right, we're going live in 5,
Okay.
4, 3, live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Environment Subcommittee.
Uh-oh, Mr. Chair, you froze.
You're frozen, Dan. Oh, let me go tell him. Hold on.
Good, I thought it was just me. Uh-oh.
Next, we'll get to Delegate Love's bill.
Wait, we didn't hear you because you froze.
Okay. Oh, all right. Okay. Am I unfrozen now? Okay.
Watching justice.
All right. All right.
It's okay.
Well, the good news is I didn't say much that I can't repeat. So first bill, these are the 4 bills we're going to cover. HB 1284, Delegate Terraza's bill, we're going to review. And thank you, Delegate Terraza, for sending us the table of provisions. Then House Bill 1165, Delegate Love's bill, we're going to review the part that we didn't get to last week, the watershed project, part of Delegate Love's bill. Then Delegate Allen's House Bill 1264, and my bill, House Bill 1266. So with that, why don't we go ahead and jump in? And Kristen, you want to start with the review of House Bill 1284, and Delegate Terraza, feel free to to chime in as we discuss your bill.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to bring up the text of the bill or just to go over it? Okay.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
So the first piece on page 3 in lines 8 through 11, it's repealing an existing exemption for stream restoration projects regarding wetlands and waterways application fees.
Just as a reminder, we talked about that in light of the MDE fees bill. And I said I'd put off the discussion for here.
Right. Okay.
Keep going.
Yep.
Okay. So this new section relates to stream restoration project application requirements. The bill applies to a person applying for a wetlands and waterways authorization for a stream restoration project associated with achieving local MS4 permit targets, Chesapeake Bay TMDL goals, compensatory mitigation goals, or other restoration goals. So a project applicant would have to show in the application specific objectives of the project, including a description of how the project will improve or align with certain measurable and quantifiable goals regarding biological uplift, ecological uplift, Chesapeake Bay water quality, forest conservation, and climate change.
So
Yeah.
And by the way,
sorry, go ahead.
well, oh no, sure, but let me just say also, if anyone has I see Delegate Foley put her hand up, and Delegate, we'll get to you in a second. I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions along the way, feel free to put your hand up. So Delegate Terraza, you want to go ahead, and then I'll call on Delegate Foley.
The only thing I was going to say about that section is the reason for it is because what we heard in a couple of the cases in Howard County, at least, was that folks were told that the purpose of the projects was one thing, and then it sort of was like a shifting goal. So we wanted the goals to be clear, and also to make sure we're at least discussing or hearing about how that aligns with our other climate and environmental goals.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is, what is meant by biological uplift and ecological uplift? Are those terms of art?
I think they are regarding stream restorations. I mean, in a very simple form, it's talking, I think, about the life improvement as well as the system as a whole, the ecological system as a whole improving. but I would need somebody with a more
I
science.
mean,
brain.
uplift is just kind of a different word, you know.
I understood. I think I've seen it. I think I've seen it associated as a term of art with stream restoration projects, but
Okay.
I would defer to somebody who has a little more background on that.
Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure Delegate Terrassa can clarify a little more, but yes, it is a term of art, and you know, some of these stream restoration projects, they are so focused on the channel itself and restoring the channel, but the biology or the ecology of the stream is harmed, where, you know, species lose their habitat, and you know, we want to make sure that we're improving the biology, in other words, the species that are living in that stream area and the ecology of the stream when we're restoring it and not harming it.
Sorry, I should have asked Delegate Terrassa if you wanted to add anything on that.
Well, I've been working on it with Delegate Ruth also, so I'm happy for her to answer any questions, but there are biological function based parameters in the MDE checklist for these types of projects. So I do think that is something folks are familiar with. And there are ways, like this is a benthic index of biotic integrity score of fair or worse. Like basically that's the condition of the stream you need before you do a project. So the idea is that get better.
Okay. Delegate Otto.
I had that same question about this biological uplift and ecological uplift. I don't understand what we're asking for here, to be honest, and how's that defined and quantifiable?
Oh, sorry. So what they need to do is talk about how it aligns with those goals. We're not in this bill requiring a certain measurement of it, but there are measurements of it. Like I was saying, the benthic index of biotic integrity score. Basically, those are they're already supposed to speak to what that is currently in the stream, and the claim of these projects is that that'll make that better. And so the point is anything that makes it better would satisfy this, but this isn't a requirement that it happen. It's just a requirement that they speak to it. I mean, we could be more specific in how that's defined, but I don't think folks were thrilled about that happening.
Well, I agree. I think I know what you're asking for, but the top line, the number one says following measurable and quantifiable goals regarding.
Right. So the point is they will set goals and say, okay, so the benthic index now is, or the BB index, I think they call it, is such and such. And our goal is to make it such and such else, or measure it how they want. They can say how the goal, but how will they know? The bottom line is this: how do they know the project is successful? How do we know the project is successful? There has to be some way to speak to that. There has to be some way they know whether it's successful or not. And part of the issue here is that the only way that's really getting measured these days at this point is whether or not the stream bank stays stable. And there's a couple other things that relate to the channel itself. And the assumption is that will then it will result in biological and ecological uplift. But certainly I've heard a lot about that not necessarily happening in all cases. So the idea is it should at least state what the goal is in relation to those. Maybe their goal is that they don't think there will be biological uplift, but they need to state that in the application.
All right, I think you said that then. So the applicant puts that into the application and specifies what their objective is. And is there any penalty if they don't achieve that?
Nope, just like there isn't now. But the idea is for us to be talking about it and for us to getting a better measurement of it and knowing that they're working towards that.
Well, I don't disagree that we need to look at the consequences of what we're doing for Yeah, thank you.
Delegate Otto, can I ask that you, if you ask more questions, could you just speak a little closer to your microphone? Because I'm having trouble hearing you. But I did hear the last one, but if you could, I appreciate it.
Okay, Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, just to further clarify on that, I'm looking at a web page on the Index of Biotic Integrity on DNR. And, some of the things they look at are like fish surveys, amphibians and reptiles, crayfish, insects, snails, bivalves. So, we just want to make sure that the stream, those are indications of the stream health, and that we're not only looking at the sediment and the banks itself, the stability of the banks, and whether they're eroding, that we're also looking at the health of the stream in terms of the biology that lives there. And so there are measures on this. I'm not a scientist, but DNR certainly knows how to do that.
Sure. Okay, very good. All right, Kristen, you want to continue?
Sure. So continuing with the application requirements, the application would also, an applicant would have to include a plan for monitoring the biological uplift, including plan for pre and post restoration monitoring, biological community health, and water quality in upstream areas above the project and downstream areas below the project, and using the before-after control impacts methodology to evaluate the impacts of activities associated with the project. A plan for minimizing tree removal would need to be included in the application. Measurable and quantifiable.
Can I just stop for a second? Because
Sure.
one of the most important things here is sort of the mapping of the trees, or indicating somehow to the community, because this goes back to the community in Baltimore County. I don't know whose district it's in, but it's near Delegate Ruth. At any rate, I mean, they were told, we're going to restore your stream and we're going to plant a lot of trees, and some trees may need to be removed. So the idea is to get clear information to the community so they know whether to give input or if they have concerns. I mean, the idea is they should know what to expect and what's coming out.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Delegate Terraza, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
2I there, it says a plan for accounting for any additional trees lost or removed during the project process. So that means if I guess there are more trees that are removed than we're in the plan, it is, when you say a plan for accounting for, you mean sort of how they would offset any additional trees that are lost, or
I mean, certainly I'd love for them to do that, but at least the way I intended this was that they'd at least have to. So if they say these are the trees we're going to remove, and they remove these other trees, they
Right.
should at least do an accounting of that, or let the county know, or.
I see. So I see. It's an accounting in the sense of letting the county know that X number of trees more than were planned were taken out.
Right. And I guess it's kind of, I'm not exactly sure I can speak to how this all works together, but this is an application for an authorization from MDE. A lot of times that is going through the county or with the county as the applicant. So I think it'd more be to MDE, because if MDE authorizes the project and then the project takes out a lot more trees, there should be at least a way for MDE to know that, other than people getting really upset and screaming from the rooftops.
Right. Okay. Got it. Delegate Otto?
Yeah, I sort of lost my thought there, but doesn't the forest conservation plan already cover this? I mean, they got to submit to that too with the county for the permit.
So they have alternative compliance to forest conservation. I don't know if somebody else wants to speak to that, but they don't have to directly comply with the Forest Conservation Act. They have an alternative compliance that they can need to do. I don't know, and I don't know the details of whether they will plan for accounting, but I don't feel super strongly about that number 2 if people have concerns about it. I think the idea was just generally, like, if they say they're gonna remove these 10 trees, instead they clear cut the whole area, so they should have to tell somebody what happened.
Well, I
Okay.
don't disagree with that, but I think they'd have to report that to the Forest Conservation
I
Plan.
can't speak to that. DNR might be able to.
And,
And these projects are, they're exempt under the Forest Conservation Act. What the requirements they have, I don't know, but the exemption under the primary law, these types of projects do have an exemption under current law.
this sounds like an expensive process, so, are we negating, giving a negative thing that nobody will do any stream restoration?
Well, Delegate, let's just go through the bill. We're just going to, discuss the provisions of the bill. At some point we can, discuss and debate the merits, but let's just, at this point, let's just review.
Okay.
So, okay.
So
I think you were on number 4.
right, an applicant would need to submit measurable and quantifiable standards for determining stream restoration success. A plan for addressing upland best management practices. And a plan,
I'm sorry, I'm going to raise my hand on that. In Delegate Terrassa, addressing related upland best management practices. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so what we know from the Caesar report, and actually we'll talk about this in Delegate Love's bill, and it's something that they worked really hard and I think is a really great thing, is that in the Caesar report, it basically said in order for these projects to be to have a better chance of success, you really need to deal with what's upland from there. So something in terms of, somebody else might be able to speak to what all the different BMPs are, but you can have, rain garden sounds like a small thing, but stormwater management ponds or all sorts of other things upland, because the idea is if you're going to fix the stream channel, you should be slowing the water that caused it to become incised in the first place. Otherwise, it'll just get re-incised. So the idea is that you'll have better results if you can slow the water down upland. And so basically the Caesar report said you need to do those in order for that to be more successful, or at least have a possibility of success. And like I said, I think that the pilot projects and Delegate Love's bill speak to that, but this is just sort of saying they should at least speak to what the upland best management practices are that they are going to take on.
Okay. All right. Delegate Otto, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I
Separate
still
before.
do. I still have questions, the tremendous impact it's going to have on local governments and people, the fiscal note says $1 million or more.
I'm happy to address the fiscal note, but I think maybe we should, if it's up to the chairman, whether he wants to talk about that now or go.
Yeah, let's keep through the.
Yeah, let's keep going, reviewing the bill. So, okay, Delegate Foley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm question about number 6. So since it references the unified guide for crediting stream and flooding restoration projects in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and it doesn't list them here. I just wanted to get an idea of what's on that list. So what are those? I mean, just some examples. You don't have to give me the exhaustive list.
So
Some examples.
I could just read from the top, or project tree removal, post-project tree loss, depletion of DO. Somebody will have to tell me what that is. Dissolved organic carbon, iron flocculate, the warmer stream temperatures. That's a big one, because when you take out all the trees, one of the problems that happens in the stream as it remains is there's not the shading to keep the water temperatures down. Benthic IBI decline, that is the actual, what this report said was that one of the unintended consequences could actually be a decrease in the biological function of the stream. I don't know if you want me to keep going. I can also send you the chart. blockage
Yeah.
of fish passage.
Yeah, maybe, I'm sorry, Delegate Truss. Yeah, maybe if you want to send out the
Sure, I'd be happy to.
table to subcommittee members.
Sure.
Delegate Foley, were those enough examples or you want?
Yeah, I just was trying to get an idea of what, kinds of things she
Sure.
was talking about. So yes, that gives me an idea. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not looking at the table, but as I recall, and I think Delegate Foley would be interested, that invasive species are one of the potential unintended
Ah,
consequences.
okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. I forgot. I missed that one.
Okay, let's see, any other questions about? All right, so we covered 6. How about, so Kristen, you want to continue with the next section?
Sure. The next section states that before MDE may issue an authorization for a stream restoration project, they must conduct a community engagement process that provides an opportunity for public input. And it includes requirements for notice. So owners of property that are within 1/4 mile of a boundary of the project area, adjacent property within 1 mile downstream of a boundary of the project area. Notice would be posted, a written description of the project that is posted on 4 locations in the project area. It must be clearly visible. There's a 60-day public comment period.
Okay, hold on, Kristen. Delegate Foley has a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Kristen, keep going, and then I'll ask my question, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
At least 2 public meetings that allow for both in-person and virtual attendance must be held. And that would include an initial meeting on the 30% project design documents and a meeting that takes place before any final approval of the project.
And
I
can
would
I,
just,
sorry.
Yeah, no, Delegate Terrassa, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to a couple of these things. The reason that we have a 1/4 mile, and I'm certainly open to negotiation on that for sure, is that what we were hearing from people is that they are right there, right, they can see it, it's right there in their backyard, but because maybe there's a tiny strip of land that's not owned by them, it's owned, or it's not part of the project boundary, they're not getting informed. So we really need like a radius from the property boundary rather than just whatever is actually touching the boundary. So that was the point of that piece. And then the posting is because it might be a public area. It might be somewhere that people enjoy using, and they would have no idea this was going to happen if there's nothing posted on the property. And I know that's a relatively inexpensive way to give even more people notice of what's happening. And and on the public meeting, 2 things. So the reason they're set as at 30% and then before final approval is because a lot of times what folks are saying is that even when they get the information, it's too early in the process for them to have any meaningful information at that point. And then later, so that there's time to comment when it is actually submitted or before it's approved.
Okay, all right, thank you. Delegate Foley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 2 questions about this part. One is, this is MDE doing all of this, not DNR. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. Second question is, are there any notice/public input requirements now?
Not for MS4 permits, because they're not considered a loss of resource at all. So my understanding is in the MS4, there's no requirement of public notice or meeting or hearing or anything.
Okay.
And so none of that occurs in the MS4 permit.
Okay, and so a follow-up, so is this process somewhere else? I mean, does MDE do a similar process for other projects that are not MS4?
So they do some process. Okay, well, let me preview the fiscal note response. My understanding is that there's concern here about MDE being in charge of all this process, and I'm definitely looking at or open to this. Is certainly the meetings being held by the the applicant for the project. I think that probably makes more sense, and I do think that's one of the things they felt was would add to the expense of it. I don't have the exact, I'll be honest, I'm blanking on exactly what the MDE process is on them, but they do have similar, there's a 60-day comment period on some things. I don't know what it is for mitigation bank. I can't remember the exact answer to that, but there are various processes that these, I don't know if anybody else can speak to that, but there are various processes that these come from.
Okay, thank you.
And Delegate Terrazas, just as a follow-up, so I guess you're saying that it's not right now, for at least some of these projects, it's not guaranteed that even adjacent property owners would get some notice about this?
You know what? I can't remember that. That might be a question for MD, but what I do know is that there's no posting of the property, there's no meeting required whatsoever, and that the information our constituents are getting are pretty useless. It may be that they're required to inform adjacent property owners. That may be, and I apologize.
No, it's okay. That's all right. Okay, let's see, before we continue, any other questions about these provisions? Delegate Otto?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I agree that it's a challenge now to give public notice to things, and I think there ought to be a place that they can access it, and like posting the property makes sense to me, and where they can find further information, be it a website or the local library for the application makes sense to me. But these public meetings get expensive to hold and typically aren't well attended.
Okay, all right. Delegate Guyton?
Thank you so much. And thank you, Delegate Terrasa, for being so steadfast in your support of this issue. I know it's been a big issue in your area. And while I don't know that we've seen the problems in my area that you have, I also have had constituents who are concerned with what's going on behind their houses and how it's affected the trees in particular. So I appreciate that. I do want to point out that as far as the public comment period, and I think that Chair Stein might also have some input here. Generally in our area where there was a big stream restoration project, I think it was fairly simple because they went through the community associations to do that, and they answered questions with the community association. So I'd be surprised if that cost anything, because I know that I've been able to hold meetings in the same spaces, for basically nothing. So I don't know. I appreciate that Delegate Otto is in a different place where the meeting opportunities might not be as obvious and as current and as excuse me, my dog is jumping on me. And as often, but for most of us, I think that that's something that happens anyway with community associations and community meetings. I host them myself several times a year. My question for you, Delegate Terrasa, is, we've talked about before that I've received both concerns about this issue, but I've also received really, really strong support for the concept behind stream restoration projects from environmental engineers who I really trust in my area. So it looks like this bill is different than some of what you have proposed in the past. And I want you to speak to that a little bit, about the fact that you're not making funding more complicated that I see, but what you're doing is putting a lot more guardrails on it. And then the second part of that question is, are those guardrails, the fact that they have to do the maps of the trees and they have to list every tree more than a certain parameter or diameter, are those going to increase the cost of their project so that they're prohibitive to the state when we need to do them?
So I appreciate that question. And what I would say is that we need to have some guardrails on it. It might be better if we just required, certain measurements or we measured them. There are other ways to do this that might be less expensive, but trying to get it in a way that trying to get it in this way, it may add to the cost of a project. But from my perspective, we need two things. We need the guardrails and we need data, because there is a lot of research out there also about the destruction that these cause. And even that unintended consequences chart that I think was sent to you guys now, you know, that came from the Chesapeake Bay program, that there's the same scientists who we trust to come up with sort of all the information that the point system comes from through MDE. So there is concern, and we need to have some way, regardless of what it is, to get at these. Like, what are we doing about these unintended consequences? I believe we can do some things with stream restoration, but the question is it offset? Does that offset the loss that you get? So for example, if you're going to fix the stream banks and not do anything upland, or if you're going to fix the streams and cut down a ton of trees and destroy the habitat there, are we weighing that? And really what I'd like to see, and what it gets to in the end, is MDE to reevaluate that and do some kind of point system that takes that into account. And that might be better for everybody, but I don't think that's likely to happen this year. But it is a direction I think we need to be going in, because there is enough information out there, which I'm happy to share with you, about problems with these.
Yeah. And thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just say, no, I absolutely agree with you. I have heard the problems. So I do agree that we need some guardrails. I'm not in disagreement about any of that. But I also feel from my conversations with a lot of really smart people that there are situations where these restoration projects are really helpful and needed for our environment and the long-term health of the Bay. This bill, yeah, I was just, is this bill the wish list, or is this bill the very minimal that you think we need in order to make sure that these projects don't impact the environment negatively?
So
Yeah,
I
and-
would say,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Delegate Tarassa, but I just want to make clear, we're not having sort of a debate on sort of the merits of the bill at this point. Just want to make sure we get through the review of the bill, the fiscal note, and potentially at another meeting, we could have this sort of, you know, substantive, you know, debate on the merits and the pros and cons. So, but having said that, Delegate Tarassa, feel free to respond to that. But I want to make sure that, you know, we get through the rest of the bill. There is about at least another half page, talk about the fiscal note, and then.
right. No, I appreciate that. I guess the only thing I'd say is that one of the problems that we have is that we're not measuring the impact of these projects. So it's hard to know which ones are more successful than others. We know which ones hold up and the stream bank stays the way they've made it, or they've stayed reconnected to the floodplain, but we don't know about the actual impact of the sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, and the health of the Bay. And all we know is that the Bay hasn't gotten better. So one of the strong things that I feel the strongest about, and there seems to be the most resistance to, is doing some of that monitoring to understand. So one of the things we said is measure before, like upstream and downstream. So, you know, are you making this water, is it healthier below where you did the project, or is it healthier before and after you did the project? Right now it's done on modeling, and it's not clear that that modeling takes into account the unintended consequences.
And Delegate, maybe that's a good segue to talk about the rest of the bill, where you talk about pollution reduction credits and adjustments.
Well, I just
Section
want to
D.
mention the website, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
But I will say I talked to MDE. So what this is maintain a website with the information about all the stream restoration projects. They technically have a portal. I've had a lot of conversations with them. I challenge you guys to find the portal and find information on it, but it also doesn't have the information that we're requiring in this bill. But I will say that MDE has asked that instead the project applicants maintain their own website that has that information. So MDE is not responsible for the content, but that MDE maintain links to that on their site. And I do think that that makes some sense. I don't want MDE held responsible for they can't, you know, check whether it's every last bit of that is correct, or what these folks put on there. So I think that makes sense, and would most likely want to amend it to do that.
Okay. All right, and then section E, about adopting regulations to modify protocol for determining how pollution credits are awarded. Maybe just want to cover that briefly, or Kristen, you covered briefly.
Other than what, I mean, I think it might be better expanded on by the sponsor. I can read the provisions, but.
So what I would say about this is that we want MDE to take another look at this. I don't think this is necessarily something we can tackle this year. And maybe something that we come back and do, but the bottom line is what I was telling to Delegate Guyton is that we're not looking at the unintended consequences. So you can have as big a project as you want that takes out, that clear cuts trees, and you're not getting dinged for any of the unintended consequences there. Whereas somebody else who's doing more surgical work on the stream, taking out only the trees they need, they might not get dinged for that because they're only taking out a few trees here and there. So we really want to encourage that not taking out more trees, but we also want to make sure that there's some way to encourage this more surgical approach, and more successful approach.
Okay. All right, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Delegate Terrassa expressed it well, but I'll just add that, that the credits that are awarded for this, and there are, I guess, two different really types of credits. One are credits for mitigation when you do a project and you have to do a environmental project to compensate for that. And the other one is the MS4 credits that the local jurisdictions have to have. But, they're really, for stream restoration, I mean, because the credits are really focused on water quality. That's sort of the goal of it. And so the stream restorations, it's really focused a lot on, the channel itself, the sediment, and nitrogen and phosphorus, and, how the channel itself impacts those. But all these other things have an impact on water quality as well as on the biology and ecology too. So trees, filter water. And so that's something that, that should be accounted for. And so that was really sort of the goal of this.
Okay, all right, thank you. Delegate Terrassa, did you say you wanted to discuss the fiscal notes?
Oh, I was just going to say that while it wasn't detailed in terms of what was going to cost a significant amount of money, I think there's a couple things that I think we would look at, and one of them is the going forward part in my chart that I showed you, the things that are requiring MDE to do these, to take a new look at these. And I do want them to do that, but that's something we maybe need to talk more about the fiscal note and how that would work. The other thing is that if we change the meetings to be done by the applicant, and then where there's been some discussion with MDE about maybe not doing hearings, because at least their concern is that doing hearings for all of these will get expensive. So I'm trying to address those things, and I'll continue to, but I think those should significantly take down the cost to MDE.
Okay, all right. Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the sponsor summed it up of some of what my questions were. They're talking about 13 positions at MDE in the fiscal note, and a $1.4 million expense. Has this been before appropriations?
No, I don't think at this point, we haven't asked appropriation, so it hasn't been.
If I may, I'd add, you got a lot, the public notice of a project taking place. We need to do something about that, and how we structure it, I don't know. With the demise of local papers and all that, and we voted to change things because there wasn't a local paper at a convenient thing, and people aren't reading them. People aren't reading these posts on websites either, but we need to direct them there in some fashion, and posting it with the projects taking place and letters to the local landowners, I think is a viable way. So I think that's a good part of the bill. Thank you.
And
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yeah,
just
sure.
respond to that? I really
Yes.
appreciate that, Delegate Otto. And obviously I agree with that statement. What I would say is that we need to make sure whatever notice they get is meaningful, so it tells them enough information so they know whether to be concerned. Because these folks in Baltimore County that had their entire backyards wiped out, basically, of all the trees, were told, hey, we're going to restore your stream. That sounds fabulous. We're going to plant lots of trees. Great, I'm all in. And they said, we might have to remove some trees. Okay, well, maybe they might have to remove a few. So we just need to make sure that whatever information they have is sufficient for them to know to pay attention. But I appreciate your points.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to talk about the notice provisions of this too, and the public hearing. I appreciate that you're trying to get the fiscal note down, and you obviously have to do that, right? And then trying to shift the cost and the responsibility away from MDE for these things. But just saying that,
And reduce it.
yeah, right. But just saying that, like, especially with respect to the public meetings and then having their own website, I have a lot of suspicion about that. I don't think that them holding a public meeting is, somebody has to watch them, right? Like somebody has to be there to watch them and make sure that they are actually taking public input and what they're doing with it. And then, and then them posting on their own website, man, I don't know about that. I'm just not sure that that's a good way to really keep track of what they're doing. I do like the notice provisions that you're trying to do. I do think the notice provisions are important. I'm just suspect of shifting the responsibility for the public hearings and the website reporting to them.
Delegate Toronto, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, and then we're going to need to move on. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll be talking about stream restoration, but go ahead, Delegate Toronto.
Yeah, I'm actually, I could talk to Delegate Foley offline. I'm a little confused about the statement. Is your statement that it needs to be on the MDE website? Or, yeah, okay. And it isn't that they need it, just to be clear, they don't need to do their own websites. They have to be able to post the information on whatever website they have. And I think, this day and age, we could add that they could post it on some accessible place and wherever it is, like it could be, documents attached to a Facebook page or whatever, but people need to know, well, I hear you. You don't seem to like that. It seems to me you want it stronger, so I don't know how to respond other than happy to talk to you offline and give you more.
No, I'm just saying that they're stakeholders here. These people are stakeholders. We're trying to police them. And then we're saying, oh, the notice provisions, they're going to fulfill that responsibility. So I just think that that's not a good.
So yeah, if I could just say one last thing. Right now in the MDE checklist for this type of project, basically MDE has to assess whether the public notice and process or whatever they did with the public is sufficient. And I've asked them multiple times to say, well, how would you know? Like, how can they assess? So right now what's happening is there's no meeting minutes or meetings for the most part. There's no recording of the meeting, and what they're doing instead is they report to MDE and something that often the community doesn't see, and they say, here's what we did for community engagement and we think it's sufficient. And I'm not sure how MDE weighs that without more information. So I think anything we can do in that direction is helpful.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Very good discussion. Thank you, Delegate, and thanks to subcommittee members. Let's move on to House Bill 1165. Delegate Love's bill. We discussed the stream restoration related aspects last week, and we wanted to dive into the watershed project part of the bill. So Kristen and Delegate Love, we'll turn things over to you to start the review of that.
I'm pulling up the document and just getting it on the right page. So give me a second, please.
Sure.
Kristen, is this the most recent reprint?
I don't have recent amendments. This is the first set of amendments. I don't have a reprint. I haven't received updated amendments. Last I heard they were in the amendment office.
So I guess, Kristen, this would be the version. Well, I guess we did send this.
Yeah, it's the version
this
that was
week
sent,
that was sent out, yeah.
when we first met on it. So let me pull it
Okay.
up for you.
Mine's dated 3/6/24.
That's me too. That
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's the one.
Yeah, so there are additional amendments coming. They just we haven't received them. So. I guess I'm on page. Well, the document is page 30 of the document. It's spelled page 27. And
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask that we get a copy of that as soon as it's available?
Oh, sure. You mean with
Copy
the reprint with the new amendments?
Yeah,
Oh,
that'd be
yes.
great.
Sure.
Thanks.
yeah, we don't have the amendments, so we can't do a reprint. So starting on line 15 is where the bill is establishing the whole watershed restoration partnership to accelerate restoration of the Chesapeake and Atlantic coastal bays and their watershed by equitably focusing assistance on action in areas that are cost effective and likely to demonstrate a rapid systemic response to restoration activity. And it's supported by the local government.
Kristen, I'm sorry. What page of the reprint are you on?
So, so it's on bill page 27.
Bill
But if
page
you're looking
27,
at an
okay.
electronic document, it's going to show page 30.
I see. Okay, but on the reprint, it
On the
says page
reprint,
27. Got
Page
it.
27.
Okay.
And we're down, starting a new section, starting in line 14.
Right.
And it's establishing a state management team to administer the partnership, which would include MDE, DNR, MDA, Secretary of Planning, critical areas, and the Chief Resilience Officer.
Delga Terrasa, is your hand up from your question about the
So
amendments?
sorry, yes.
Okay, no problem. Okay, yeah, and whenever anyone has a question, just raise your hand and we'll.
And so in line 22, that is requiring the state management team to issue an RFP for projects that occur within a single Maryland 8-digit watershed. Include a strategy describing the partners, actions, and benefits of that project will incorporate over a 5-year period. And provide at least 5 benefits that are specified later in the bill. I can go down to those if that's helpful, or we can just, would be endorsed by each county and municipal corporation in which the project will occur. So I think these are starting in line 7. I think these are the benefits. 5 of which would need to be included in the project. So it's whether it's located in a watershed in which habitat restoration and pollution reduction will result in the greatest improvements to shallow water habitats and living resources, and achieve rapid delisting of impaired streams, and generate rapidly improving conditions in the local ecosystem. Emphasizes actions that are expected to provide the greatest, most cost-effective and measurable amount of pollution reduction.
Kristen, sorry, I do have a question for the sponsor. Can Kristen, no, it's there, the shallow water habitat. I guess, Doug, I love you put that in there specifically because that comes from the CESA report. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And just to clarify one thing, a project doesn't have to have every single one of these, but the state management team will evaluate each proposal based on whether it has these and how many of them it has these.
Was this where they were supposed to include 5? Or let me look at the bill. I could. like earlier, let's see. Provide at least 5 of the benefits specified under subsection F2
Yeah,
8. And let's see, F2, and so those would be down here, I guess. I see. Okay.
yeah,
That's where the 5
comes up. Yep.
I got you. Okay. And so those would be anticipate so in addition to land-based habitat restoration and water, so this would be in addition to the land-based habitat restoration and water quality improvement, anticipates benefits related to creation or restoration of wildlife habitat, riparian buffers, wetland restoration, restoration of aquatic resources, carbon sequestration, climate change mitigation, local employment opportunities, improving and protecting public health and recreational opportunities and public access to waterways and natural habitats.
So I'm sorry, Kristen, you're saying that, and Delegate Love, that a project proposal would have to have at least 5 of those 8. Is that right?
No. The 5 comes in
Of,
later.
starting in line, the 5 comes in and starting in line
Right there.
6 on page 30.
So, the
I'm sorry, go ahead, Delegate.
Sure. So it's going to evaluate a project based on all of these factors that are listed in the Roman numerals and how many of them it has. And then it says, I don't see the actual list, but that it has to have 5 of those things that you're seeing in Roman numeral 8. So that's how MDE is going to look at these projects. How many of the things does it have, and does it has to have 5 of these. And the more of the other things it has, the better scored a project will be.
Okay, Delegate Otto?
So who is this state management team was composed of?
Delegate, I'm sorry, we missed your question. Could you repeat it?
Who is this state management team that's making these decisions, and who is it composed of?
So that is that. Sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
So representatives from DNR, MDE, Department of Ag, Department of Planning, Critical Area Commission, and the Chief Resilient Officer.
Yep, that's back on pages 27 to 28.
So starting
Is
right
this
here.
a new composition?
Yes, this is a whole new, exciting, innovative idea.
So we're turning it over to the bureaucrats, huh?
Well, bureaucrats already do it. And so the goal is to get everybody in the room so that these projects can be evaluated by everyone. And then if they're approved, then to help the projects move through the process of permitting and funding in a more efficient way.
Very good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Terraza?
I just want to comment that I really like that piece a lot. I think it makes so much sense to have these folks all in one place having the conversation, or all on Zoom, or however they meet. But I think that is a real piece that's missing in stream restoration contract evaluation. And I think this makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Let's see, where were we, Kristen? Had we?
So we went over, the RFPs that must include or meet specified criteria, like where they're located, and then the it was the 5. So it has. We went over the criteria. We went over the 5 benefits, or the list of benefits, 5 of which must be included in the project, and then. Let's see, where did we stop?
And let's see, what page, I'm sorry, what page are we on? This is the,
So this is where, so the evaluation of the proposed projects is on page 29. The requirements that are,
Right, okay.
that's out what the state management team must evaluate. So start on line 7.
Right, right,
There's requirements for location. I can't remember where I stopped reading, honestly, but so
maybe at the middle reprint page 30. There's criteria under Roman numeral 8.
right, okay. And those are the benefit list. That would be in addition to the habitat restoration and water quality improvements. 5 of these 5 benefits from this list would have to be, I think, also be included in the proposed project.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to read down, I mean, some more, so I didn't know if there's a question.
Sure.
Go ahead and read.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So starting in line 22, it requires the state management team to work to ensure that projects approved include 1 project located in a predominantly urban area, 1 project located in a predominantly suburban area, 2 projects primarily focus on reducing pollution in a predominantly agricultural area, and 1 project that incorporates collaborative efforts with an adjoining state.
And then yeah.
Ensure that at least 2 approved projects are located in and provide benefits to an overburdened or underserved community.
Okay, Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Rich. So we have, if I'm reading my math, there's 5 projects. And 2 of those 5 have to be in a overburdened or underserved community. Am I right? So then they'll primarily maybe with those, I'm just trying to figure, okay, an ag area, adjacent state, suburban or urban.
2 ag areas.
So I got 2 ags and those 5. So probably those 2 of those 5 probably in the urban or suburban area. Is that a reasonably fair statement?
I mean, they could be in the ag areas as well. I mean, it
Okay.
depends on where they are, or
Okay.
you know that adjoins the state,
Thank you.
another state. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yep.
Okay, so for a period of 5 years after approving a project, the state management team must assist the project sponsor in developing an implementation and financing plan, including measurable outcomes for the duration of the project. Award implementation grants from the fund that's created in the bill and other appropriate state funds and accounts for up to 50% of project costs.
And if I can just jump in here,
Sure.
that means the other 50% of the costs has to come from, somewhere else. Locals, feds, private financing, somewhere else. The state's only coming up with 50% from this account.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
So the
Delegate
state,
Adam.
oh, I'm sorry, again.
So where's the source of money for this account?
Kristen?
So
I
I
can
think,
also-
yeah, so I think funding, it comes from the 2010 Trust Fund, the Clean Water Commerce Act, and I gotta look at the rest of this.
Yeah, it looks like maybe it's on bottom of page 33. It lists the different funding sources.
Waterway
Um,
Improvement Fund, Chesapeake Bay, Atlantic Coastal Bays, and the water.
Yeah, Delegate Otto, if you could speak a little bit louder, we're having trouble hearing you.
My speaker must be difficult, but I'll try.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
I believe it was
Do you
the
want me to go
chair
down
who-
to those provisions?
Sure. And then let's go to those provisions. Let's see, and then,
So it's the bottom of page 33 onto page 34. So it's a 2010 Trust Fund, Bay Restoration Fund, Clean Water Commerce account, Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Fund, Cost Sharing Program under MDA, and the Waterway Improvement Fund in DNR, I think it's DNR.
Well, I have great concerns about the Bay Restoration Fund and the Ag Land Preservation Fund.
Delegate Love, and I know your additional amendments, your amendments to this section are in the amendment office, but do I recall that, like, for example, some of your language deals with amounts or requirements for use of these funds. So for example, BRF, do I remember that it's only after funding for wastewater treatment funds?
That's
Correct. Correct.
Wastewater treatment plant, sorry, yes.
Right. And I
The only
don't know.
mandated, oh, sorry, the only mandated funding, I think, is from the 2010 Trust Fund. The others, I think, are just changing language within the fund to authorize use to fund the bill, fund under the bill.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
I think Dylan may have, sorry to put you on the spot, Dylan, or Matt Stegman. There are very few amendments to this section, but I believe there were a couple of clarifying amendments here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, do you care if I jump in?
Sure.
I think, Kristen, if you just scroll down like just a little bit, the language, I think, in lines 16 through 19 is really important. I think that is the language that the intent, from my understanding, so DNR, we have the Waterway Improvement Fund, right? I think for the projects selected, the state management team will have the ability to look at all of the fund sources available and then take a holistic look at that. And if there are things in that project that the WIF would be eligible for, then that conversation can happen because of this bill. I think that language keeps it keeps the strings, for lack of a better word, I guess, on from the original count. And I'll defer to Matt for anything else.
Yeah, and also I do want to say once the amendments are back from the amendment office, we'll have a chance to take a look at them, the specific language, but.
Like this is, so you're saying this is existing funding and it's intended to be using for, existing purposes. And this is just kind of bringing it all into this one program.
Yeah, I think
not new funding.
Yeah, this bill is to implement the pillars of the Caesar report, which is about targeting all of our existing resources. So the state management team, because of this bill, will be able to look at all the eligible fund sources at these and these 5 projects, in these 5 watersheds, and determine how to best use that funding to meet, the best ecological restoration of that watershed. Targeting our existing resources, I think, is the most important thing. But it all is connected to the original use of the fund.
Right. And if you look at what we sent out earlier, thank you, Matt Stegman, for this incredible chart. Couple of the amendments go straight to this. For example, clarifying that BRF funds may be provided to the whole watershed fund only after funding all eligible wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And then there's some other language saying, MALF funds may only be used to provide funding to the whole watershed fund for projects consistent with current legislatively permitted uses of MALF. So some clarifying and tightening language here.
Well, my concern is that it's not circumventing the process in the Ag Land Preservation Fund. I mean, that has to go through the county and the state and all for approval. And I know all the hoops that we have to go through to achieve that, and as well as the DNR program. So I don't want to circumvent that's not gonna, I don't mind it being utilized for that and being counted, but
Is there anyone who could address the delegate specific question?
Sure, can Matt jump in here? Because I think he
Sure.
can.
Yeah, so just generally, you know, for each of the funding sources identified for the partnership, so actually in the reprint that's on the screen now, towards the front of the bill, and they kind of occur in different places just because it's of where they occur in the code. But I think all those restrictions on the different funding sources are in the reprint that's up now. For the but for each of the programs, it's there's very clear language that states that anything that would be contributed to the fund and the whole watershed partnership has to be consistent with the mandated legislated uses of those funds.
So it would still have to go through the process of that is established and approval by the board or whatever governing body.
Yeah, that's I believe that's correct. You know, I think the intent again is that something that fits those individual funding sources and also fits one of the projects in the whole watershed partnership, you know, would be eligible for funding through, you know, through this mechanism.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Kristen, could we go back? I think we jumped ahead to talk about funding. There was a page or two which we jumped over. Maybe it was page 31. Oh, you're talking about oh, wait a minute. Remember, we talked about for up to 50% of project costs, and that's where we started talking about funding. So that was in the reprint, page 31, line 20.
Yes, these are the requirements of the state management team for the 5-year period after approving a project.
Yeah.
So so they award operation grants to the project sponsor in accordance to where we just were, which I think that's where the mandated funding of $100,000 from the 2010 trust fund comes. For the $20,000 would go to each of the 5 projects. They each would receive $20,000, I believe. So
Okay.
So the so we're now lost my train of thought. So so this is the state management team. They would provide for coordinated and transparent state permitting to the extent allowed by state and federal law, including the use of the permit tracking dashboard that's established under the bill. They would provide funding to the project sponsor to support water quality monitoring at the project site, and meet with the project sponsor and participating local governments at least 6 times each calendar year to review and facilitate progress on the project. The project sponsor must provide opportunities for community engagement for the duration of the project by including at least 4 community meetings that include representation from each local government endorsing the project, and an opportunity for public comment on the preliminary design of each major or large-scale action proposed by the project. A project sponsor must also identify appropriate metrics to track progress on meeting the outcomes identified in the project's implementation and financing plan. And a project sponsor must report on the progress of the project at the intervals and in the format required by the state management team. The report must include information on community engagement efforts, restoration and conservation actions initiated and completed, trees affected and trees at immediate or future risk of impact due to restoration actions, funding from all sources that was solicited, awarded, or spent, and the progress made toward meeting the outcomes identified in the project's implementation and financing plan, including the metrics used for tracking progress under the previous section. The state management team is authorized to require a project sponsor to perform and report on water quality monitoring for more than 5 years. Status updates or status reports are due to the General Assembly. Line 10, subsection K, that's the requirement to establish a permit tracking dashboard. And then we're getting back into the funding provisions.
Right, okay. Delgado?
Yes, that monitoring provision, can the contractor contract with like a river keeper or water keeper group to do that for them?
Delgado Love or Kristen?
It
I
doesn't,
don't think that's in the bill, so I'm not sure what's envisioned.
yeah, it doesn't specify that. I mean, they could. It's certainly not prohibited. And one of the key things here is that there are multiple different ways of doing water quality monitoring, some of which are extremely expensive, and some of which are not. So there's some flexibility in there. We want to make sure that there is water quality monitoring, but we didn't want to get too prescriptive as to how they did it and with whom they did it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Kristen, you want to continue?
So I think that this really just ends with the whole watershed fund. So we kind of already went there. I don't know if there's any provisions that you want to look at that again.
Anyone? Well, let's see. So we're going through page 33, 34.
Various uses of the fund.
Contracting requirements. Page 35, line 24. Beneficial use of dredge material. Kristen or Delgado Love, remind me why we're providing the definition of dredge material. I guess it relates later on in the bill.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can
Sure.
kick that to Dylan or Matt.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
Basically the waterway improvement fund, right now we're authorized to spend some of the money on different dredging for better navigation hazards for vessels and such. This language adds beneficial use in there, and I think it's later in, but it allows us to better kind of give us additional ability to financially support projects that utilize the beneficial use of dredge material. Beneficial use being that it includes like habitat creation and other, better restoration practices that through the dredging that utilize that dredge material in a way that's positive for the environment.
I see. Okay, so I see on 37, so you say that the Waterway Improvement Fund may finance completely, a project that involves beneficial use of dredge material.
Yep.
Okay. All right, and I guess that's just, I guess and there's the inclusion of the Stream Restoration Contractors Licensing Board that's set up under the bill. Page 38. Yeah, I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
No, sorry, I was just agreeing with you. I said,
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Delgado, is your hand up from before?
I'm still concerned if we had some kind of amendment that said these projects are eligible for that funding through the ag land preservation and the other things through the normal application process, I'd be more comfortable. I don't want to see them topped off over somebody that's been going through the process for several years.
Yeah, I think that's definitely how it's envisioned. I mean, Dylan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's my understanding of how it would operate. And I think with the amendments, it keeps that structure in place. But Matt might know more than me actually on that specific question.
Delegate Otto, why don't we get back to you with the language? So you can take a look at it. And, you know, if you want to put an amendment in, we're certainly happy to talk about that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Matt, did you want to?
I don't think it's quite that clear. And
Okay.
I don't want it. I don't mind it being counted if they've gone through the process already or whatever. That would be a great thing. But.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks everyone. That wraps up our discussion of House Bill 1165. Thanks everyone for a good discussion. So now we're going to turn to House Bill 1264, Delegate Allen's bill. So Kristen, if you could discuss what this bill does.
Sorry, I'm just getting my papers.
It's all right. I know we're all probably moving around a fair amount of paper here.
I
Not
just,
the
I
most
think I
environmentally
just like
friendly,
throw
but
my
oh well.
papers. I don't know what I
Yeah.
do with them. But they're here. So which one did you say?
House Bill 1264, Delegate
Okay.
Allen's.
Right. Okay. So this bill deals, so under current law, a permit is required from the MDE to construct a small pond or dam. And there's currently an exemption in place for certain small ponds that meet certain conditions. That exemption is not available to certain water bodies of Glens Falls, Jones Falls, or Herring Run. And what this bill does is that it repeals language and then therefore would allow these jurisdictions to also apply for these or having a permit exemption where they could take their project straight to the Soil Conservation District rather than to MDE.
Okay. Delegate Love?
This isn't the beaver believer, is it? Because I am a beaver believer. I just need to say that.
No, unfortunately not.
No, not this one. Right. But Delegate Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, this is a local bill for 3 areas up in Baltimore County, Baltimore City.
That's right. I mean, if you're looking at the watersheds of the Glens Falls, Jones Falls, Herring Run, right? Those 2 jurisdictions.
Nobody else.
It would only apply to those jurisdictions, right?
Perfect. We can move something today.
Okay. Any other questions about this bill?
I moved the bill, Mr. Chair.
So second. Okay. All those in favor of the bill, there are no amendments. So all those straight bill, no amendments. All those in favor of the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we passed HB 1264. Great. All right, last bill is House Bill 1266. This is my bill with respect to reimbursement process, reimbursement procedures under the Clean Water Commerce Act. And we also have Mark Hoffman from Chesapeake Bay Commission on the call, can help with explaining it. Kristen, could you start? And then Mark, I'll probably ask you to jump in.
Is it up?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. So this bill is dealing with the authorized payment schedules for pay for performance contracts under the Clean Water Commerce Act. And I'm just going to go to the amendment language. I know the proponents of the bill, look at this as really just a clarification of the payment schedules that are allowed under these contracts. This would require the department to allow for a cost per pound of nitrogen reduced that varies with the achievement of performance milestones. The first performance milestone may not occur earlier than the mutual assent by both parties to the contract that the construction, reconstruction, or rehabilitation is complete. And then in order to ensure the achievement of environmental outcomes agreed to in a contract, MDE may require a minimum final payment, and for a contract award greater than $500,000, additional financial protections, including a letter of credit, insurance instrument, or performance bond.
Okay, Delegate Ross, I'll get to you in one section, but just 1 second, just by way of background. We passed what we call the Clean Water Commerce Act a few years ago. We allocated, I believe it's $20 million from the BRF to focus on the most cost-effective ways of getting pollution reduction. And there are certain sort of buckets within that $20 million. This issue came up because in the most recent round of proposals that were submitted under the Clean Water Commerce Act, some of the most cost-effective ones were excluded because they allowed the work happens up front. They wanted a payment schedule that would reflect payment of those early upfront construction costs with a a non-uniform payment schedule. But that was disqualified. They were disqualified, and so this was being introduced on behalf of the Maryland members of the Chesapeake Bay Commission as a way to rectify that. Mark, anything you want to add to my description?
No. Good evening, everyone. Mark Hoffman, Chesapeake Bay Commission. No, Delegate, I'd be happy. I can go into more detail on the bill or the amendments as much as the subcommittee desires.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Delegate Terrassa.
Sorry, couldn't find my cursor there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I guess I'm trying to understand is, and I thought Kristen was saying that this was clarifying, or you're just saying one part of it's clarifying? Because it sounds like it's shifting how these are.
Yeah, I said the proponents, that's the from the testimony we received from the proponents, that their take was that this was intended to be a fix of the original intent under the Clean Water Commerce Act.
And can you help us understand, like, what does a payment schedule look like now, and what would it look like under if this passed?
Well, I think right now that payments are being paid on an annual basis, and I think this would allow the upfront payments to occur. And that appears to be in line how for performance contracts are currently operated, but I don't really know too much beyond that.
Okay, but are they already paid for performance, or we're shifting them to pay for performance?
No, that pay for performance is the Clean Water Commerce Act. That's what the contract is for. You're paying for environmental outcomes. And so what this shifts is just the payment schedule. So whether they get the payments up front.
Yeah.
May I jump in to help answer that question?
Sure.
Thank you. So right now, Delegate Terrassa, the way MDE is reading the Clean Water Commerce Act, the payments are paid out in equal installments over the life of the project. And that is proving very, very difficult for those who are doing them because their investment is a lot upfront. And the original intent was not how MDE is interpreting it. So the way this would change it would say that there is more upfront, and then it is continued to pay out over time. So they don't get everything upfront. It is a pay for performance, but they get more upfront to help with those initial upfront costs. Does that help?
A little bit. How much can they get upfront under the bill?
Well, I will say it, Mark, maybe if you want to jump in, that is to be negotiated, but the idea is that again, if there are increased costs during the first couple of years associated with the construction of the project, and say those upfront costs cover maybe 50% of the total project cost, that conceivably they could be reimbursed for that disproportionate amount that they spent on the construction. Now, the amendments do specify that the department can require, to ensure achievement of all the outcomes that are agreed to, a minimum final payment, and also for a large contract above $500,000, they could they could require additional financial protections, such as a performance bond, so that, let's say, half, 50, maybe even 60% of the project cost is paid after construction of that big BMP. But then for some reason, the project doesn't deliver, that there would be this financial guarantee so that the department would be able to recoup, an appropriate amount from their initial payment.
So I guess where I'm confused, or like, I like that you have the performance bond possibility and all that for the larger contracts. But for the smaller contracts or anything under 500,000, which is not necessarily small, but it could be small. If all MDE can hold back is a minimal payment, is that enough to make sure that the contract is performed? Because I'm confused by the name pay for performance, because to me, that seems like you perform and then you get paid. But this is sort of like you get paid up front.
Well,
and then parts that pay for performance, or maybe it's
Yeah.
just like a confusing word term for.
Yeah, I guess the idea, it's any sort of non-uniform payment. In other words, if a contractor let's say it's a 10-year contract where, outcomes are supposed to be achieved during a 10-year period. Right now, the department is saying they can only pay 10% per year of the cost. And let's say under, if this bill were to pass and the contractor can demonstrate that a third of the total project costs is spent during, say, the first couple years, then the department, this would have to be negotiated. The department's not required to pay, X amount up front or during the first couple years, but they would be allowed to pay for the actual costs that the contractor incurs up front, provided that there are, enough guarantees, during the balance of that 10-year period to ensure that the specified outcomes are achieved.
And it looks like performance milestones are still a part of the payments with this amended language, right?
How's that?
I believe so, yeah.
I didn't have a chance to look at it, so. But if you pay it up front, then how could you pay for performance milestones?
Well, I think it could vary. It wouldn't have to all be upfront. It's just this variation. Instead of having to have these equal payments over the life of the project, you would have this variation, and they could be negotiated in their contract with, where they're setting certain performance milestones, and then on the achievement of those milestones, and I think that's when payments are made.
Okay, I see a lot of other hands, so I'm going to stop talking.
Okay, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my concerns are actually very similar to Delegate Terrasa's, and I was confused, but I think that was explained about how it can be called pay for performance when we're paying them before they have performance. But more generally, as I recall from the previous bill, the advantage to the state of doing this is that we get measurable outcomes and better use of state dollars. The advantage of the people doing the projects is it's an investment, and that gets a return on their investment. And so it's not like, an investment, you invest money and then you get a return later. And so, to me, it's just very concerning that we're talking about paying up front before the performance. And I do see that there are milestones and that there's financial protections for the larger contracts, but I don't really see any guardrails. For example, like what's to stop MDE from paying 90% upfront? If I understand right, it's up to MDE to make these judgments. And I guess so, as I'm thinking out loud here, can we put say a maximum, like if I hire somebody to do work on my house, they can ask me to pay a third up front. Can we say no more than a third paid before completion of the project or something like that?
Yeah, Mark, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, hi all. Yeah, I think we need to be clear about what we mean by upfront. Okay, and the amendments specifically were drafted to tighten up this part of the bill. If you look at starting on line 10, Roman numeral II, the first performance milestone may not occur earlier than by mutual assent by both parties that the construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation is complete. So nobody is getting any money until the BMP is built and put in the ground. That's sort of what pay performance is. So there is no upfront, there's no deposit. It's only after the project is done and complete and in the ground and certified as such by the agency that any money that the contractor gets anything. Okay, and then but they don't get it all, then there's this residual amount, the minimum final payment and potentially these other means to ensure that the project continues to perform over its intended life. So that's sort of the how pay for what we mean by pay for performance.
And Mark, I mean, this is done, this type of sort of non-uniform payment schedule is done a number of different places. Is that right?
Yes, that's how the Chesapeake Bay Trust Fund operates. It's the model that's been used successfully in Anne Arundel County to lower the cost of doing their projects. So sort of the genesis of this bill, it was really the appropriators on the commission that drove this, and they wanted to see the state doing BMPs at a more competitive price and really let the free market operate and come to the state with here's projects we can do and we can do them more cheaply and sort of use those market forces to drive restoration more cost effectively. That was the whole sort of the genesis of the whole thing.
Okay, Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. So if I read this correctly, the state is engaging in contracts to do projects. And what we're hoping to be able to do with this performance, the PACE contracting, is that the carrying costs the contractor will have to carry up front will be partially mitigated by the performance payments until the completion of the project, which should be paid a certain amount. And then there'll be a period later that, based upon the success of the project, progress payments will be made going forward. Is that a fair statement?
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Right, and just to follow up on a point you made, Delegate Morgan, with a uniform payment schedule where you get the same amount every year, someone has to borrow the money to pay for that BMP up front. If you can't get reimbursed for much of it up front, then you have to borrow that money, or whoever's the investor is going to demand, return for the money that's spent. This way, the state doesn't have to pay for that financing cost.
So I agree with you completely on that, because the carrying cost can be exponential based upon the interest rate they're carrying against the project duration. Got it.
Right. Okay, Delegate Terrassa.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be so confused here, but let me ask this really quickly of Mark or whoever would answer this. When you say BMPs, this is oftentimes, sometimes stream restoration projects?
Fundamentally, the bill is agnostic related to the type of BMP. The goal here is to achieve, it doesn't get into that, it's things that count for nitrogen reductions per the Chesapeake Bay program standards.
Okay.
Yes, Delegate.
Well, just that the stream restoration is sort of the model numbers show it as very high. So that would be something that might use this more frequently.
It does, the bill doesn't speak to any particular.
I know, but is that what happens, or is that?
It's possible that stream restoration could be funded with this. If it's the most cost-effective method.
Okay, and then the other question, if I can just one more. I think I'm just fundamentally confused about this, and maybe I can ask questions offline and get my answers, but if nobody else is confused, but I don't understand when you say upfront cost, but then you say it doesn't get paid until it's complete. those sound contradictory to me, but again, I'm open to my just being confused about that. So it seems to me that they would, if they're completing the project before they're paid, then they're not getting their upfront costs and would have to finance it.
Yes, there's going to be some financing regardless. There's no upfront. I didn't use that term. So let's not, again, there's no payment. If you look at line 10, Roman numeral II, there's no payments made until the construction, reconstruction, or rehabilitation is complete, period. So
Yeah, that might have been my mistake. So,
So then
go
they
ahead.
do,
I'm sorry.
okay, so but then they do have to finance it either way.
There's going to be some, there is going to be some financing, yes. So it's a question of balancing. We're trying to balance the risks to the state that the project gets done and those benefits are accrued, and the costs to the state. So we're just trying to balance those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, just to sort of chime in, what happened with, so the proposals last year was the most cost-effective proposals were ones that requested sort of a non-uniform payment schedule. But they weren't allowed because they were seeking a non-uniform payment schedule. The more expensive ones, I mean, still relatively cost-effective, but the more expensive ones, which did accept uniform payment for the life of the contract, those are the ones that were accepted. So the whole purpose of this act from 3 years ago was to fund the most cost-effective ways to reduce pollution. So that was our intention in enacting this bill. We're trying to sort of, allow this type of non-uniform payment schedule to provide for more cost-effective measures. Delegate Otto.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it was to accelerate the activity, to get the projects in place in a quicker fashion. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, Mark, can you comment on that?
That was the.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
now,
I mean, but again, Senator Gazzoni was sort of the brainchild behind this, and he was looking at it through the lens of an appropriator. And this is sort of a pilot. I mean, there's a sunset on this program, and it was a pilot to see whether or not we can use the pay for performance and the state not deciding up front what types of projects are going to be done, let the market kind of come to the state with the best ideas and the best practices, and we would pick those.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move the amendments.
Well, Delegate, I appreciate that. Since I'm the sponsor, but I had earlier said to one or two delegates that we would just review the amendments today and then another day vote on them. So if you could hold your motion until the next time we meet, I appreciate it.
Fair enough.
Okay, any other questions about this? Okay, again, we will take this up at a future meeting, one that can't be too far off since it's Wednesday of crossover week. But that wraps up our agenda for tonight. Thanks everyone for your patience and good discussion. And we will be meeting again either tomorrow or Friday. So we'll have to figure out the schedule. Could very well be tomorrow. So, I'll make an announcement on the floor tomorrow. Any other questions, or if not, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.